Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky fans react to Tuesday's show about trading for Jerami Grant. Plus, we keep the mailbag open. Lots of stuff in the front office coming next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcast. This one's always free and never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 25,000 subscribers, all of whom, Andy, are digesting the at least the hypothetical of a Jerami Grant trade, something we talked about at length on Tuesday's show with Mike Richman of Locked On Blazers, and whether or not this would be a good idea or a bad idea for the Lakers. We certainly gave our opinion after listening to Mike, and you guys have reacted as well, both on Twitter and at Cam Brothers and on the YouTube page. Do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sportsing like we want them to, but this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Andy, first and foremost, Tuesday's show is a good reminder of, the value of the network, bouncing around, listening to us, obviously, as your first listen, but getting insight from other shows as well, stuff that's relevant to the Lakers. That's what it was, certainly with Jerami Grant. Mike didn't seem to give Grant a great review given the cost, and Lakers fans on the Locked On Lakers YouTube page seemed to agree.
Yeah, I mean, we should make it clear it's the reported rumored cost, because
Right.
there's been a lot of reporting about the Lakers and Blazers in conversations, but the Blazers, Joe Cronin, wanting 2 first-round picks for Jerami Grant, and the Lakers thus far being pretty steadfast in they're not going to give more than 1 first-round pick if that's ultimately, if draft compensation ends up part of this deal. And I think you and I mean, we talked about Jerami Grant on at least a couple shows heading into the scouting report with Mike Richman, and we both, I don't think, thought 2 firsts was necessarily the best way for the Lakers to take. You got to remember, if they're going to use 2 firsts, that's it. So this is your basically 1 move away type move. Like, you're basically saying Jerami Grant may not make us the front runner in the NBA, but this puts us in the conversation with the rest of the league's front runners. Yep. It has to, because we don't really have much else left that we can count on to make a move. And to me, like, beyond some of the stuff that we in particular heard about Jerami Grant that doesn't make him appealing in terms of what I would be looking for from Grant, namely the defensive versatility or lack thereof, Jerami Grant doesn't put the Lakers close enough to where you have to have 1 first left. You simply have to. And if you cannot make this move without a first left over, I don't think you can make this deal.
Well, and what I think is interesting about it, and we talked about this, like, it's a hypothetical right now as much as anything, like a philosophical question even, because Grant is really, other than Zach LaVine, the guy on the block, somebody who
I want to make clear, I'm not giving up any draft compensation for.
Oh God, no.
I need to be receiving draft compensation.
Zach LaVine is not trash. Like, some of the LaVine backlash, I think, is going a little overboard, like in terms of like describing how bad, he's terrible. But no, like, he is someone that Chicago is trying to get off that deal, and if any team is going to take it, they should be compensated. You're certainly not pulling a Westbrook 2.0 where you take the horrible contract and give up draft capital. Like, you can't make that mistake twice.
Right. At the very least, I get to keep my picks and we just line up salary.
Right. Make that work. You give up something. There's a Max Christie type player thrown in or something for Chicago to make it. First of all, the Bulls, like, let's say the Bulls managed to botch the Zach LaVine trade, that almost definitionally would still only be like their ninth worst move of the last 8 months. They're just such a badly run group. The thing with Grant is like it's a really interesting discussion point to me, because you have to break it down in three ways. There's the draft capital question, and I think both you and I both agree it's not. Certainly, two is no. I'm a little dodgy on even one if it's not protected, pretty heavily protected or something like that. And so that's question number one. Question number two is, if you have to include players from the rotation to make the math work, and you do, at what point does trading those players, even if you get the best player in the deal back, let's just say they would with Grant, does that make up the gap? Like how much do you still lose there? How much does that mitigate the gain of the player? And this is true of both Grant and anybody else they might trade for. You start adding multiple players, the gap shrinks. So that's it. And then part three is the salary. I mean, he's got 4 more years left on this deal. And while I know, and you pointed this out, yes, technically speaking, the cap is going to be going up pretty significantly after this TV deal. On 4 years from now, $36 million or $37 million or whatever it is for a 34-year-old, 35-year-old Grant. I don't care how much the cap goes up. It's gonna be a big number. Yeah. And you have to break all three of these things down, and then Andy, weigh which ones matter most in a very much a win now situation.
Yeah, and this also too, I think really dovetails into some of the questions that we want to get into from you guys in the mailbag, whether on Twitter or in the community section of the YouTube channel. We put out a call for mailbag questions. A lot of them were about Rob Pelinka and Jeanie Buss and the front office in general. And this question with Jerami Grant, I think, illustrates a lot of the complications that Rob Pelinka is going to be dealing with when it comes to trying to improve this roster while working with few assets and in a new CBA that we're going to talk about later on. It ain't just us saying this, it's everybody who reports the league saying it. This new CBA has a lot of teams spooked, and these are all complicating factors for Rob Pelinka as he also tries to improve a team that's good but not great. And in some ways, good makes it harder to figure out what to do, because it makes it harder to identify exactly what you can and can't remove. Like in some ways, if it was
it's a very specific kind of good too. Like it's not good with abundance and excess. It's good with, if this works out here and guys stay healthy and you have LeBron and you have AD. But it's not like you've got 2 or 3 guys like with all like the trade chips, and like the foundation for improvement is very, very thin.
Right. I'm just saying if 3/4 of the roster was bad but on tradable deals, where you just had to attach assets to them and you can move everybody, but these are all players that you clearly want to move because they're not going to help you at all, that would make Pelinka's job easier. It would.
Yeah. So we'll get to the mailbag here in a second, but just to give you a feel for some of the comments about the hypothetical Grant deal from the YouTube page. My son Buddy says no, Rui is just as good if given an opportunity, and no to first round picks. That's one that touches both on the question of draft compensation and whether or not you think they're better. The talent gap is enough. He's saying that Rui is just as good. I'm not sure I totally agree with that, but I don't think the gap is significant enough. Ray, because one thing other than remember, Grant's not a good rebounder.
No, he actually may be worse than Rui.
Right.
And Rui's not a good enough rebounder for his size.
He's not. And so you would like to be able to improve that portion of it if you're going to move him, and Grant doesn't do that. Ray 008. I think I would prefer a trade with Cam Johnson and DFS from the Nets over Grant. I don't know if that's a possibility, but again, gets to that notion of you really get one swing with this stuff, and you got to make sure it's a good one. Another supporter of Rui. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's Eric McGilp, I believe, 7904. Rui's just coming into his prime. Trading him for a 31-year-old Grant seems dumb and short-sighted. Gets into the length of Grant's deal. Let's talk Jeanie, and let's talk Rob in opening up the mailbag next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports. We love them so much we never want the sports to stop, but it's that time of year where you got fewer games and the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to, but FanDuel lets you, lets me, lets everyone keep the sports going whenever we want. All you got to do is just open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood, and there are options. You got baseball, you got WNBA, you got the Olympics, and the 2024-2025 odds for the upcoming NBA season. As of this recording, Lakers 35-1 to win the title. Anthony Davis 150-1 for MVP. LeBron 200-1. AD is also 25-1 for Defensive Player of the Year. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
Quick reminder, thanks for making Locked On Lakers first listen of the day. Your second, hey, how about Locked On NBA? There's no offseason in the NBA, and the Locked On NBA podcast provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less, and no one keeps you as informed and as entertained as Locked On NBA. It's available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's pop open the mailbag, Andy. We don't have a jingle for that or any kind of cool effect, but this one from Chet-H2HL2GR. Okay, that works.
Yeah, mailbag music.
Sure. I like it. It's soothing. Chet. He says Dr. Buss was an innovative genius who both changed the face of the league and helped popularize the sport and left a glorious legacy. Why then do his children adamantly insist on dragging Dr. Buss's legacy through the mud? P.S. It's time to sell the team. I'm not sure the P.S. was really necessary there. The response from Steve Wise 1656, because Jeanie doesn't know what she's doing. Rob fell backwards into the 2020 team after missing out on Leonard and won a championship. So, of course, the logical thing to do was to break up that entire team, other than THT, Bron, and AD, then made the Westbrook trade that sent this team back going 5 on 5 years now. That is the theme of most of the letters right now that we get about the front office.
Yeah. Look, Dr. Buss.
You want to groove a little bit here before you answer the question, Andy?
Dr. Buss was an innovative genius. There's no question about that. He was a visionary when it came to, the way the NBA could work, the way the NBA could exist as an entertainment product on top of just sports, and the way you could just rethink the entire presentation of it. He also, though, conquered the NBA in a very different time, and it was a very different league, and it was much easier for Dr. Buss, who was sort of, it's a weird thing to say, but like your garden variety billionaire, as opposed to like the newfangled billionaires we got going right now.
You could be a regular billionaire back then.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Or like many hundred millionaire and own a team, whereas now you got to be like a VC guy with like 3 or 4 or 5 billion on you.
Right. You combine the fact that it was easier to Bigfoot back then with a different CBA in a time when being in Los Angeles was much more essential to being seen like around the world, with fans, whatever, than it is now. None of that is to say that Dr. Buss would not have had the ability to conquer the current NBA, but it has to be acknowledged it was a different NBA. I also think
I'll put it this way. Given both of their histories, if the CBA looked, well, first of all, I don't even think there was a CBA. Let's pretend there was a CBA in 1964 or whatever. If the CBA looked then like it does now, and we've had this sort of run over the last, 10 years or whatever of these more and more restrictive setups around the league, if it had always been like this, the Lakers and Celtics would not be sitting on 16 and 18 titles. It just wouldn't have worked that way. I think, a little bit of luck, innovative ownership, all that kind of stuff, they'd still be preeminent franchises in the league, but they just wouldn't have this many titles. It's almost impossible.
Like, that being said, though, I think, we're going to get into this with more questions. I mean, it's sell the team time. The Lakers, I don't think they're not going to be selling the team outright anytime soon, if ever. I do think they need to start considering, though, bringing in a non-Buss with, if not an equal share, pretty close to an equal share, just because
Andy, Kurt Rambis is not a Buss.
Well, if Kurt Rambis can, put together the money, if he can either pass the hat or get somebody to float in the cash, whatever, they need somebody, I think, to come in there and try to inject some money that would put them at the level of some of these other teams around the league, because they are at an economic disadvantage when it comes to, this is their only revenue stream. Whereas these other owners around the league, in a lot of ways, the franchise is a plaything for them. And it doesn't mean that they don't care. I think a lot of them do. For some of them, it's just an ego boost and, manhood contest, but some of them do care. But either way, this is not their primary revenue source. Like, this is for Jeanie and her siblings, I guess, other than, Jeanie's tequila and, the occasional TV venture. Like, by the way, look, her side hustle. That
I've never had fewer than it's good, and you and I have never had fewer than 11 jobs. So I respect anybody for having a side hustle.
Right, not mocking it, but just it's not the same world, and they're not at the same economic level. That being said, there are reasons to question whether or not Jeanie Buss is truly who it takes. Truly who it takes to be the ultimate shot caller with this organization, and whether she is capable of making the very difficult choices that need to be made in terms of who she puts in charge of everything. There is some truth that Rob Pelinka, some of the team that won the 2020 championship was not built with him as the head guy in charge. That was magic. The Anthony Davis thing was not a product of Rob Pelinka being there. It was a product of LeBron, AD, and Clutch wanting it to happen. And there were certain things that worked out very well for Rob Pelinka. And since that championship, as we will talk about, his decisions at times have been very good, at times have been kind of inexplicable. And it's led them to where they are right now, which is in a good but difficult place.
I think, and when you talk about money, and we'll break here in a sec, but when you talk about money, I do think it's important to distinguish. It's not that they don't spend money on players. They do. They are, that's not where they run into trouble. It's really the rest of it where, they're really good at spectacle and putting on a show and the entertainment, which, I think they put money into that. But it's the architecture around the basketball operation. And I think that's both a money thing, but I also think that it's part of the biggest flaw that they have as an organization, and it's not a new one. And I will tell you what I think it is next. So you noted, Andy, that it would be great if they found some deeper pockets to inject a little cash or something like that. And, I don't know how you would do that without diluting the value that the Buss family has to the point where they wouldn't be the majority owners anymore, or things like that. So I don't know if that, but what I do think new blood and non-Buss,
I would pursue buying out Jim and Johnny, but that's just one approach.
Free up $1 or $2.
Yeah.
Where I really think they need that injection of newness, and don't get me wrong, the money would help, is to some degree, I think this small operation that they have is just reflective of kind of the insular nature that the franchise still has. And they've gotten better about it. They've gotten better about not leaning everything into sort of Lakers exceptionalism and the way that it's always been done. And this is how my dad did it. And I do think they've at different times have tried to recognize the way the league has changed. And, a lot of the longtime employees aren't there anymore. I mean, granted, most of them are very, very old at this point, but they have had some turnover with people and have tried to do things a little differently and all of that. But at the same time, it's a front office run by Kurt and Joey and Jesse, who I think are good. I mean, Joey and Jesse, I think have done a good job, but they're still insular family people. And then headed by Rob Pelinka, who was Kobe's agent. And so it's like there's not much else there. And so that I think is where they really run into, is they're just still too insular. Not every coach has to be a former Laker anymore, but which is nice, but there's still not a broad, they should have a much bigger shop than they do. And I think some of it is money, but I think some of it is just, this is where I think Jeannie's comfort zone is. And, it'd be great if she broke out of it a little bit more and potentially held Rob to be like, look, hire more people, get whatever, or I'll let you go and we'll bring somebody else who can do it.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that one factor that if Rob Pelinka doesn't internally feel a lot of heat, I'm not even talking about externally what's being said to him, but internally how he really feels when he's alone thinking about this job. If he doesn't feel a lot of heat, I would imagine it's because he recognizes that for a long time, Jeanie has prioritized her personal relationships and trusts with the execs that she hires over their professional qualifications. And it's just, that's something you and I have talked about for a long time. It becomes an Achilles heel of hers. And she needs to be more open to uncomfortability when it comes to bringing in people that could potentially improve the organization a lot and bring different perspective and bring experiences that were not formed primarily inside the walls of El Segundo. I mean, one of the complicating factors of Jesse and Joey, who again, we both think are very good at their jobs, I don't think they're ever going to rise higher than they already are, not necessarily because of Jeannie's just undying faith in Rob Pelinka, but because I wouldn't blame Jeanie if she wants to avoid a situation like what happened with Jim, where she ultimately had to fire her brother. And even though she and Jim did not have a good relationship, that is still painful for you to go through. It's awkward for your family. And I doubt she wants to go through that again. And I could understand that, but that makes the insularity that much more complicated, because two of the guys that theoretically could be someone that would take over for Rob Pelinka, you feel like wouldn't be good choices.
And even firing Rob, Andy, is are you firing Kobe? I mean, to some degree, there's a little bit of that.
Yes.
Yep. I'm not trying to be flip.
No,
I mean,
and
you talk about the loyalty, Jeanie is, I mean, you can say she's good at this, she's not good at this, where I always draw the line is, she doesn't care. They're just interested, they're just trying to wreck the team. They just want the money. Jeanie cares deeply, I think in some ways, almost too deeply about the success of the team and the, 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 the and the history of it, and the fans, and the connection to the legacy that they have, and the connection to older players, and all of these things, and the history, almost to the point where I think it can be limiting. I think it keeps them from doing certain things because they are so protective, I think, of the responsibility and the legacy. I think that criticism that she's somehow aloof is absurd and unfair. So the part of the problem with Rob is like, this was a close friend of Kobe's, is someone that, they have sort of bonded around the memory of Kobe in the organization. Kobe helped bring him in. Like, there's a lot of baggage, even just in letting Rob go, I think, on a personal level, which, they say, Andy, you shouldn't work with family. And I agree. It's a terrible idea. But, like, they shouldn't work with family, you shouldn't work with friends. Like, they're doing all of it in El Segundo, and they have for a long time.
Right. And get to this question from Chet -HL2GR. Are you a Pelinka defender like John Ireland and Trevor Lane? I would not call Trevor a Pelinka defender. John Ireland absolutely is, but he's pretty open about knowing where his checks are signed in El Segundo by the Lakers.
He refers to himself as a shameless Lakers apologist. So.
Right. John makes no bones about what he's doing. For us, I think it would depend on how you define defender. Like we have both said for years, the receipts are out there, including on this show, that Jeanie could and should do better than Rob Pelinka. He's not necessarily god awful at his job. I don't think that's fair, but I also don't think he is anywhere close to the upper third of the league or someone that Jeanie.
And certainly not Rob without an architecture.
No, I mean, look, if you're the Lakers, I don't think you should be settled into, someone like Rob Pelinka that I doubt he would really be in heavy demand if he hit the open market. I don't know how much more clear we can be about this. We would change or make changes in the front office if we were in charge. Case in point, at ROQ_75, would Bob Myers, in your opinion, be better than Rob Pelinka as Lakers GM? Yes, I think he'd be much better. Yeah, as a start. But if you're defining a Pelinka defender as someone who doesn't just blame Rob Pelinka for everything that either we want to happen or fans want to happen and doesn't, sometimes because things are outside of Pelinka's control, or someone who explains the context or details of what makes Rob's job hard, even while saying it's hard in part because some of the bad decisions he's made. And also, we don't care that it's hard. Like, a lot of jobs are hard. This is still the job. Figure it out.
And this from Vegetas J899. I never, the YouTube names can be really tricky to figure out the correct pronunciation. But he says this, I feel, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it starts this. I feel like Pelinka gets too much unnecessary hate from antsy Lakers fans. Let me ask you all this. If Pelinka traded 2 first-round picks for Rui, plus Rui and D'Lo for Grant, how would everyone feel? If Pelinka traded an unprotected for Cam Johnson, who can't even play 50 games a year, how would everyone feel? They would riot. And so, I think, like, we've talked a lot about the box that the Lakers are in this offseason. And what we try to do, and what I try to do, is differently is say, look, they are here. What do you do now? Like, is it smart to do the move X, Y, and Z now? And a 2 first rounds for Jerami Grant to look like you're doing something is dumb. That is a bad move. That makes things worse. Like in terms of your situation as a franchise. So is doing something stupid better than doing nothing? No, do nothing. The first rule of any move should be first do no harm. That said, where I think the criticism is fair is it, I don't even think it's unfair to be like, how come they just don't dump a second rounder or 2 second rounders to get off some of these contracts? Because they don't have very many, and you need those picks to do other things. And which veterans minimum guy is out there that's going to be so much better that it's worth losing that, because that's essentially what you're trading for. And, you could say Tyus Jones. Well, Tyus Jones wasn't going to come here unless they moved not just Cam Reddish, but 2 other starting guards. And that you have to think about the roster as a whole. How they got here, is Rob's, responsibility. That's way, and there's still all of this comes from the Westbrook trade.
But like to put this a little bit more perspective, though, Tim Bontemps over at ESPN did a recent survey with 18 unnamed execs around the league, just surveying different questions: best move of the offseason, worst move of the offseason, stuff like that. And I know, because I've heard from many of you, y'all don't think of Tim Bontemps as somebody who's a Lakers homer.
He is
that's
not.
been made very clear.
Where?
No, yeah, it's been made very. I'm not even telling you how to feel about it. I'm just saying I know how you feel about Tim. Here's one question that he asked these 18 execs: what was the biggest trend of the NBA offseason? 12 votes: teams navigating the new luxury tax apron. 3 votes: teams being stuck / general inactivity. That's 15 of the 18 votes right there, acknowledging, the whole league isn't quite sure what to do about this. And we keep telling you all, it's been a pretty quiet offseason.
It's a league-wide thing that, like the Lakers were going to have apron problems. And they were going to have all these other things. That was doing, it's I think, so like, the money they reportedly even thought about giving Clay was stupid.
Yeah,
it would have been a dumb thing to do. They made a good, they did the smart thing with not sticking their board, and they took Dalton Connect, who they didn't bring in for a workout. They didn't, because they didn't think he'd be there at 17. So they've done stuff like that. But then you can argue about the Bronny thing, which I think is overblown from a roster construction standpoint, but I get it. The job, I think what you said, the job is hard. They're in a difficult spot, and their inactivity this summer is in a vacuum justified, but nothing happens in a vacuum in sports. Right. They didn't get here in a vacuum. They got here because of a series of choices. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, some of which I thought were dumb at the time, some of which I thought were smart at the time. But this is the job. Anyway, so plenty more to get into this. Keep sending us letters. Keep sending us the stuff to read on the show. Obviously, we definitely want to be using as much of your commentary and your contributions as possible. Do want to ask you, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on TV all day, if you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest sport stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Fire! Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. You'll see us in there sometimes. It's kind of fun. All right. We will see everyone on Thursday.